we have. And what we're looking at here is pieces of the firework here, pieces of it here, pieces of it here, and pieces of it here. All right, so you got to kind of use your imagination. Got to kind of use your imagination. And I'll let you do that in a bit when I turn you loose. One thing that we do know was here in Herod's day was the theater. And one thing we do know was the harbor, which is out this direction to the left of where the Israeli flag is. And one thing we do know was here was the palace. Herod's palace. Built out on this point. Turn you loose, you can walk here to the railing like those folks are, and you can see the foundation remains, the big square freshwater pool in the middle. On a, let's say, crowfly distance, the closest you're going to get in this land to Rome is at the end of that at the end of that palace. And you can kind of see, you know, in that movie, The Titanic, where that lady was at the front of the boat doing this, you know, that's Herod out here. You know, this place becomes, you know, when Pilate is the governor, you know, he's Italian. There's nothing Semitic about him at all. He's Italian. You think he's going to spend time in Masada or Herodian? Most of the time he's here. And this then becomes the functioning administrative center, the military garrison spot as well for the Roman imperial troops, you know, the stormtroopers. You know, these guys are here. This is your Rome in the face of. The goal was to make it look like any other Roman port that you would find out there. So when you come home, you're home, yeah? Even if home is at the edge of the empire. This was the idea. This was the idea. Now we're sitting in a set of rooms that were at the entrance of the palace. The rooms were the gateway to the palace on this diagram. It's this open colonnaded portico, and then these rooms just north of it where we're sitting in. What would you have at the entrance of the palace? And when the whole thing kind of functions not just as a, you know, there's an office in the White House, right? The president lives on the second floor. There's public spaces down below. That's what you've got here. So the more public space in the office and where the soldiers were, and if there was a trial and all of that, is going to be here. Herod's inmost room is back here. This place is called the Praetorium. The place where the private guard, where the soldiers dedicated to keep Rome going and to keep the Pilate or the Herod alive are going to be here. You don't want to run afoul of these guys. All right? This is where these are the judgment halls and so on. This room, that room, that room. Okay? Now, Book of Acts. Book of Acts, chapter 2. Be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. Spoken to Jews from Galilee, where we're going. And so chapter 3, chapter 4, they're in Jerusalem. They head out to Judea. Chapter 7, Stephen is stoned. Remember yesterday we suggested he might have been a Samaritan? Chapter 8, Philip, there's a Greek name. Father of Alexander the Great, right? Philip the disciple takes the gospel to Samaria. People believe. He's got to go back to Jerusalem and explain it to the Jews back in Jerusalem that Samaritans are now believing in Jesus too. How does that work? Yeah? And then in chapter 9, Saul of Tarsus is converted. He's from the diaspora. Will go up on the Damascus Road on Shabbat on Saturday. But at the end of chapter 9, Peter now comes down to Joppa. Peter the lead disciple, Peter the fisherman, at home on the Sea of Galilee. Peter hears, we read in verse 31, the church through all Judea and Galilee And Samaria enjoyed peace. Life the way it's supposed to be. Built up, going on in the fear and respect of the Lord, in the comfort of the Holy Spirit, it continues to increase. Now what you can do is draw a line at that point in the gospel of the book of Acts and say, let's just stop it right here. We've reached the borders of the Solomonic kingdom. We've now fulfilled the hopes of the son of David. Yeah, it's good. And then the next verse, Peter, the lead guy, hears there are believers of Jesus down toward the coast, a place called Lydda. That's Lod, where the airport is today, just out of the hills on the flat land. And he hears, and there's somebody down there that is bedridden. He heals them, and all of Lydda, that town, and Sharon, that's the plain, hear about it. And then Peter hears that in Joppa, there's a believer in Jesus, a lady named Tabitha, who is sick and died. And she herself was a lady fully giving to others. Deeds of kindness and charity. And so Peter now, for the first time in his life, enters the ends of the earth. He crosses the Hellenized, the old Philistine, the Greco-Roman, the power-based coastal plain, walks 10 miles to the other end of it, to Joppa, which at least is the historic port of Jerusalem. So he says, I'm safe here. And then he goes and he lives with a guy named Simon on the sea, the tanner. What was Peter's name? Simon. So again, he's sort of moving out of it, but he's wanting to stay safe enough within his bound of tribalism, which is where he belongs, you might say. Staying with Simon, and Simon on this sea, and I've seen fishermen out here, there are some out on the point. These guys are pulling out fish Peter's never seen in his life, with equipment he's never used in his life. And I can imagine Peter hanging around a while and saying, let me try. Yeah? So he's down in Joppa, pushing the boundaries as much as he wants to push. He's pushing the boundaries about this hard. It's not very hard, is it? Nope. But he thinks he's doing something. Then we have chapter 10. Meanwhile, now you tell me how foreign this is. A man in Caesarea. Does that sound like a Jewish town? The name of the town, right? Caesarea? Named Cornelius. What kind of a name is that? Cornelius. That's a Latin name, an Italian name. Cornelius was a centurion. What kind of a job is that? Not just a soldier. He is in charge of 100 soldiers whose job description is to enforce the will of Rome. And all of what that means, from taxes to worldview. To enforce the will of Rome. And the name of his group of soldiers is called the Italian cohort. There is nothing local about this at all. It's as foreign as you can possibly get. Not only foreign, oppressive. Not only oppressive of worldview, but oppressive of your very being. Your life is sucked out of you because of people like this. And then it says he also is a devout man fearing God. And you know, you have some of these. You have people out there, in spite of their job, in spite of their position in life, they have an awareness in their heart and soul about maybe God is speaking to me in new ways and I should listen as well. He's the gentle side of the Roman Empire. You know, once in a while you find that. You know, he has money to spend and he gives it to the local people. We're going to meet one of these in Capernaum as well, where he's actually taking Rome's money and gives it to the locals so they can better their life in ways that are consistent with what they believe. You find these people once in a while. This is the kind of guy you want to find. And he has a vision. And in the vision, go and get Peter and bring him here. That's a day's walk down the coast. 2 days walk down the coast. As the soldiers are going to get Peter, later in the chapter, Peter has a vision. This is the one you know. Peter goes up to the top of the roof. In the middle of the afternoon, it's hot. He catches the Mediterranean breeze. He has a vision. What's the vision? You know this story. What's he see? There's a sheet that comes out of heaven. And in the sheet are all of the animals the book of Leviticus says don't touch. All the unclean stuff Leviticus says don't touch. Peter says, I don't touch it. 3 times, eat it. 3 times Peter says no. 3 times the voice says, what I have declared clean is clean. Peter says, I keep kosher. That's not me. Now, is Peter stubborn? Or is Peter saying, I'm going to confront? Out here on the coast, maybe it's a different voice tempting me, making me, when I'm vulnerable, seductive, and I'm going to get tripped up. I know I'm not eating kosher. I'm not going to do it. Is that stubborn, or is that being faithful to who he is and confronting? You got to read Peter how you will. I'll allow either one. God says, the voice said, I don't make junk. Oh, by the way, this Greek that this gospel in the book of Acts is written in calls this thing coming out of heaven, othene is the ancient Greek word. It is the same word used, the very same word used for the sail of the ships that are coming in. The best translation is not sheet, it's sail out of heaven. What do you see out here on the shore? You see sails of ships popping off the horizon full of all this stuff that the worldview up there wants nothing to do with, represented by this body of chaos. And there is no way Peter's going to partake of it. Then there's a knock on the door. And Peter opens the door, and he sees Roman soldiers saying, come up to Caesarea. The centurion wants to see you. And what do you think Peter thinks? He's got to be told by God, go with them. We had a West Banker, a Beit Jala, a Bethlehem fellow, come and do our MA degree. And he lived in Beit Jala during the last Palestinian uprising. He born and raised there, when Israeli soldiers would come to houses, knock on the door in the middle of the night, open the door. And so I asked Allah, I said, what would happen if you're sleeping and there's a knock on the door and you open the door and you see 2 or 3 Israeli soldiers standing there? What would happen? What does that mean to you? And he got the biggest smile on his face. He said, I'm going to jail today. All right? What's Peter supposed to think when these guys come? You're coming to Caesarea to see the centurion. Shouldn't have come out here. And you know how the story ends up, don't you? It's a couple-day walk. When he comes to the home of Cornelius, Cornelius has his whole household there. It's like he needs protection too. Peter brings his guys up with him. And it's a meeting of people. And at the end of the conversation, read the end of the story, Acts chapter 10. The Holy Spirit falls on Cornelius. And the church, the first church at the ends of the earth, begins here. Now Peter's got to go back up to Jerusalem and explain it all. Oh, this doesn't fit what they thought was going to happen. Then the book of Acts makes the shift. Saul of Tarsus takes over. Peter goes to the background. And the rest of the book of Acts is out here. The rest of the book of Acts is out here. Where a person who is fluent in Greek language and thought is able to take a message of the gospel that looks like it works really well over here, and he uses a language and he uses concepts that speak there, not here. Talk about contextualization. And he makes it work. Meeting the needs where the people are. And there are missionary journeys that we read about, and there are results that we read about, and there's a merging. Is it merging of identity? Or is it God can redeem anybody? Yeah? Now I'm going to pause because there's a question, and then 2 minutes to finish it off. Yes. Yes. Meaning? The Spirit, God's Spirit in the people is doing something that blows all the boundaries aside. And I would think not just ethnically, thinking-wise, who God is and how you approach Him. I mean, it's the whole package of life that's happening here. Wow. That's a very big question. I don't know. I'm shudder to think what would happen to the movement. Exactly. Well, I guess you could say covered. I guess you could. If this would not have happened, where would the church be today? What would we be today? Yeah. What would we be? The God's creative energy in Genesis 1 is the Spirit of God blew across the face of the deep. Yeah. It's that we don't control that. Well, the thing is that we limit Him all the time. That's the problem. That's the problem. Yeah. As the I think the word authenticate is a good one. I think so. That's the presence of God with us. That's the yeah. I don't want to tell the rest of the story. You can read about it. You should know though that this becomes Paul's final launching point to Rome. That third missionary journey when he was shipwrecked left from this harbor. The 2 years prior to that, Paul was under house arrest. And then he appealed to Caesar. He preached to Herod Agrippa II. He was under house arrest. He was held in Herod's praetorium. This room or that one or that one or that one. I don't know which one. Paul was here for 2 years. Hearing the call of the sea, feeling the breath of the wind. And from that harbor, the gospel goes out. Yeah? Yeah, this becomes the doorway. For everything else it is the doorway of the gospel out. And that's, God is full of throwing ironies our way. And just when you think this world is going to be overwhelmed with all of the chaos, even though it may look good, this doorway swings the other direction. You see? It's that baby born between the power of the temple and the power of the Herodian. You don't expect it. It's the door of the gospel going this direction. You don't expect it. Okay. Now let me give you a little bit of time. Maybe 45 minutes if you're on the bus at 11. The bus is right where we left it. And you can wander down here a bit if you're fast walking to the harbor and back. The area where the temple is, all of it's under construction now. It's just a turned over mess of construction equipment. But the harbor, what's left, Crusader era, you can see the hippodrome are the seats here, the palace down here, the ice cream over here, and please be on the bus no later than 11:25. We're chasing the sun today. There's a lot I want to do. All right, the bus is where we